We want to reach a phase of transition where we are left with a friendly, stable, prosperous Venezuela.
The president repeatedly mistook Iceland for Greenland, right? We're not mad at Iceland. They haven't cost us any money. The president just mistook the two countries for each other, correct?
Yeah, he meant to say Greenland, but I think we're all familiar with presidents that have verbal stumbles. We've had presidents like that before. Some made a lot more than this one.
Nice try. Thanks.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From Secretary of State Marco Rubio testifying before a Senate committee on the Trump administration's actions in Venezuela to ongoing developments in Minneapolis amid the immigration enforcement surge there. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines. Last night at a town hall gathering in Minneapolis, a man sprayed an unknown substance on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. It's unclear what that substance was, but Omar continued the town hall for nearly 25 minutes following that incident and said she was fine afterwards.
I feel that it is important for people, whether they are in elected office or not, to allow these people to intimidate us, to make us not fight for our constituents and for the country we love. And as I said, I've survived war, and I'm definitely going to survive intimidation and whatever these people think they can throw at me, because I'm built that way.
The attacker, 55-year-old Anthony James Kazmierczak, was immediately tackled and arrested for that assault. The attack came following Omar's comments calling for abolishing ICE and for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to resign. And as for the investigation of the shooting that has led to all of this unrest in Minneapolis, 2 federal officers fired the shots that killed 37-year-old Alex Pretti. That information was provided to Congress in a notice sent from Customs and Border Protection, who analyzed footage of the shooting and information documented by the agency. Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty joins me now with more on the fallout for ICE and Director Kristi Noem. And Andrew, let's start with the Noem issue. There are calls to remove the DHS director. They're getting louder. They're coming from inside the party. Does it seem like she's going to be able to keep her job?
Yeah, well, good morning, Holly. And you listened to the president yesterday. He was on the road in Iowa, ostensibly giving a speech about affordability, of course, this being a midterm year and that being so important to voters. But of course, the issues of what's going on in Minneapolis overshadowed all of it. And a major topic among the reporters traveling with him was his confidence in Kristi Noem, and would that continue going forward? And as we heard the president say yesterday, he continues to have full confidence in his head of DHS. He talked about her success on the southern border, securing that U.S.-Mexico border, not necessarily her actions in Minnesota. We did see, of course, Greg Bovino, the head of Customs and Border Patrol, essentially reshuffled out of Minneapolis. He had been so much of the talking piece in response to the shootings, both of Pretti and Renee Good earlier this month. But it may not entirely be up to the president here. A number of members of his party, of course, I mentioned it's a midterm year, are facing tough elections. Here's a couple senators on Capitol Hill who had some strong words about the future of Kristi Noem.
I said that I've lost confidence in her.
Do you think that President Trump should remove her from the position? Do you think she should resign?
That's obviously up to the president, but I think we would be better served with new leadership at the department.
If I were in her position, I can't think of any point of pride over the last year. She's got to make her own decision, or the president does, but she has taken this administration into the ground on an issue that we should own. We should own the issue of border security and immigration, but they have destroyed that for Republicans. Something that got the president elected, they have destroyed it through their incompetence.
So Tom Tillis, North Carolina, he's retiring. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's been a known outspoken critic in terms of Republican, more moderate Republican, when it comes to the Trump administration. But it will be fascinating, Holly, to watch some of these Republicans in the House, particularly who we know are in tough battleground districts that could potentially be the breaking point here. Because, as you noted, Hakeem Jeffries, who's the leader of the Democrats in the House, has essentially said either Kristi Noem is out or we start impeachment proceedings. Now, what that looks like when you're the party in the minority is a little unclear, but they could bring this up for a vote if they wanted to, meaning the Democrats. Right now, according to the petition, it's about 2/3 of Democrats support the impeachment of Kristi Noem. They would need to get full Democratic support as well as a little bit of Republican. So remains to be seen where things go here. But of course, the backdrop also on Capitol Hill is that government funding fight, which is now very much tied to those ICE actions, Holly.
And after federal agents shot and killed 2 citizens in Minnesota, there are now questions on whether those agents could face charges or if they have immunity. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett talked with the county attorney in Minnesota, who's now considering whether she'll bring homicide charges against federal officers. And Avajoy, does the county attorney even have the authority to bring any charges?
Hey there, Holly. This county attorney, her name is Mary Moriarty, and she says yes, she absolutely has the authority to bring these charges if the evidence points in that direction. Renee Good was shot and killed after an encounter with federal agents on January 7th. And then just a few weeks later, a little more than 2 weeks later, Alex Pretti was also shot and killed after an encounter with federal agents. And there has been public outcry. Many people want for these agents to be prosecuted. Vice President J.D. Vance has said in the past that federal agents have absolute immunity, but Moriarty is saying that is not the case. It's not always the case. And she said there is a team on the ground in Minnesota investigating and gathering evidence. Here's a portion of the conversation that I had with her. Will you bring charges against the federal agents involved in both of these incidents and even that third one that was non-fatal?
Yeah, I can't say right now. I mean, my job as a prosecutor is to be as objective as I can. It's not to make conclusions the way the administration has been, making conclusions about what happened here. It is to collect all of the evidence and then see whether charges are appropriate. I want to emphasize here, because I know the administration was saying for a period of time there was absolute immunity. That is simply not true. It is not at all true. And we do have the authority and jurisdiction to charge.
When might you make a decision then? How long does this sort of process normally take?
Each case is fact specific. And I'm not just talking about these 3. It depends on the complexity of the case. It depends on a lot of different factors. So I don't want to mislead people and say we will have a decision by X date. We will have a decision when we're ready.
How long do you have to bring charges in these cases if you decide to?
Yes, there's no statute of limitations on homicide cases. And when I say homicide, I'm going to say the ME is described both the shooting of and the death of Renee Good and Alex Pretti as homicides. That is one of the classifications they are allowed to register under law.
Now, Moriarty has sued the federal government in an attempt to preserve any evidence involved with these fatal shootings and any other case there in the state of Minnesota where they believe they could potentially bring charges against federal agents. We do know that a federal judge is reviewing that matter at this point. But Moriarty also told us that they have received a substantial amount of evidence from citizens there in Minnesota, evidence such as video recording of agents in the state of Minnesota. So that is something that she said they can absolutely use if they decide to bring charges against federal agents there in Minnesota. Holly?
And Avajoy, I want to ask you further about that cooperation, because at first the federal government said, look, we're going to handle this. We do not need state and local law enforcement involved. But now it seems to be that perhaps they are getting information from witnesses and videos that they're finding, but have the federal government, anybody there, have they been cooperative in any kind of state or local investigation?
Ms. Moriarty said that the federal government has not been cooperating with local officials, and to be frank, they don't always have to, but historically, federal agencies have cooperated with local and state agencies. So this is why this situation is a bit unusual. Ms. Moriarty also pointed out that there are certain processes that they could go through to force the federal government to continue to work with them. Step number one is this lawsuit that we now are waiting for an update on. And then there are some other steps that they could potentially take here. But Moriarty pointed out the fact that this is highly unusual, that you have the federal government that, in her words, is really physically, in some cases, prohibiting them from getting onto the scenes and reviewing evidence that could potentially be helpful in future prosecution. She said this is something that happened in one of those cases where there were some agents that physically blocked their local investigators from getting on the scene. This is what Moriarty said. These are all details and accusations that are playing out in court right now, Holly. And this is something that the federal judge in Minnesota, will have to look into and make a decision on. One thing with regards to that ruling, that impending ruling from the judge, she is anticipating some additional details from officials by today. So we may or may not get an update with regards to the preservation of evidence, but we do know that those local authorities there in the state of Minnesota say they will continue to fight to preserve the evidence. And if they lose in court, they believe they already have a ton of information that could help them if they decide to prosecute federal agents in the future.
And we know this pertains to the criminal investigation, but what about any kind of civil litigation? Could the families sue and also ask for that preservation of evidence if they feel like they might have a civil lawsuit?
We have seen in the past where there are family members who have sued the federal government, but that is something that is also very hard to overcome. We've talked about, for example, this issue of the supremacy clause, where the states don't always have the ability to sue the federal government unless they take additional steps. That is something that many family members, if they bring forward a civil lawsuit, will also have to think about. This is something that I actually have covered in the past, where in speaking with legal experts about this, some family members may decide not to bring forward those civil lawsuits because there's so many hurdles that they may have to overcome if they want to sue the federal government. But Holly, it's not something that is totally impossible.
All right, Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett for us. Thank you so much. We'll be right back to continue our look at today's top stories.
The president called you a loser, I believe.
I am thrilled about that. That makes me qualified to be Homeland Security Secretary and Senior Advisor to the President.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of the day's top stories. An activist group with the moniker 5051, which stands for 50 protests, 50 states, one movement, is calling for a nationwide shutdown on Friday to protest immigration enforcement. Organizers are asking people to skip work, school, and shopping. This call comes after American citizens were killed during protests in the Twin Cities. And moments ago, President Trump giving a speech to business leaders, administration officials, and lawmakers in Washington. Those remarks focusing on new Trump accounts for children, designed to get the latest generation of Americans investing as early as possible. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull joins us now. And Haley, how is the president describing these accounts to the average American?
Holly, President Trump is describing these accounts as giving children what he called a shot at financial freedom. And these are tax-advantaged accounts that can include for children born from 2025 through 2028, a $1,000 government contribution of seed money, and for the ability for parents and employers to contribute. Now, the president, in remarks today, touting the initiative's backing across the political spectrum, as well as those from corporate backing for it, saying this about those accounts.
And we fight to make things better, but we run into walls of other politicians that either don't want to do something or they almost feel like it's a destruction of our country. But now we're doing something much better than giving the next generation a handout. We're giving them ownership of America's future.
Trump more broadly praising some of his economic agenda items, including his tax bill, the big, beautiful bill, which he credited for these accounts, and the stock market, as he declared during his speech, Holly, that, quote, America is back. And the remarks come as the administration has sought to tout Trump's economic policies amid continued concerns from many Americans. Polling shows over the economy. It also comes amidst the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision today. And while the president has frequently publicly pressured for rate cuts and criticized Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, he notably did not weigh in on either of those fronts during his remarks today, nor two other significant issues weighing on the White House that we have heard the president weigh in on social media today, both the ongoing situation in Minneapolis as well as the administration's plans for Iran, Holly.
And Haley, speaking of Minnesota, how is the administration's view of this developing today? We got new poll numbers that show, for immigration purposes, Trump's approval rating is at the lowest level he has seen, and this is something that he was touting as a success.
Well, Holly, let's talk about Minneapolis first. The president today warning Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey that he is, quote, playing with fire. The president's comments come after Border Czar Tom Homan met with the governor and mayor yesterday. The mayor stating that Minneapolis will not enforce federal immigration laws. And then we saw Trump weigh in on Truth Social today, criticizing the mayor as the administration has stressed wanting cooperation from local police. Mayor Frey responding to that, stating, quote, the job of our police is to keep people safe, not enforce Fed immigration laws. I want them preventing homicides, not hunting down a working dad. Now, this comes after the Trump administration appeared to soften its tone and communicate with state and local officials following its initial response to the shooting of Alex Pretti over the weekend. Some of comments which were not supported with evidence, video evidence. Trump this week telling Fox News they would de-escalate, but also maintaining to reporters a view that Pretti should not have been carrying a gun, Holly. And so we are watching those developments closely here today as well.
All right, and I want to ask you about President Trump with his warning to Iran. What do we know about this?
Yeah, Holly, Trump issuing a warning to Iran if they do not make a deal as the U.S. is positioning military assets in the region. Trump writing that a, quote, massive armada is heading to Iran. He goes on to state, quote, hopefully Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. No nuclear weapons, one that is good for all parties. Time is running out. It is truly of the essence. And this comes after the president has threatened U.S. intervention over the harming of Iranian protesters, but in recent weeks had appeared to soften its tone when it says it learned hangings of protesters were halted. But last week, as that force headed towards Iran, Trump told reporters they were watching Iran closely. Now, we are hearing a response from the Iranians today, its mission to the UN stating it's ready for dialogue, but, quote, if pushed, it will defend itself and respond like never before. Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier today stating the Iranian regime is weaker than they have ever been. Now, President Trump has followed through on warnings before when they were unable to reach a deal last spring when he ordered the strikes, rather, of nuclear sites, the sites of their nuclear program and weapons sites in Iran. Notably, though, Holly, we are also seeing Saudi Arabia and the UAE stating they will not allow their territory or airspace to be used for actions against Iran. So certainly we are watching the changing sentiments towards Iran here at the White House as well today.
All right, Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull for us. Haley, thank you. Up next on Today As It Happened.
Getting frustrated by higher and higher homeowners, renters, and auto insurance? Well, I'm going to show you some simple ways that you can bring those rates down.
You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
Frustrated by higher and higher insurance rates? You know, you are not alone. One viewer just sent me this email saying Can you tell me what's the best way to shop your home and car insurance? Well, I went looking for answers.
Jim Hilbert is a woodworking craftsman who can tell you anything about his home.
2,200 square foot.
But he can't tell you why his homeowner's insurance is up for a second year in a row.
It went up 25% and then 25%?
Yeah, so about 53%, I figured.
Chances are you're paying more too. Home and renter's insurance is up more than 8%, while car insurance is up nearly 3%. With help from Realtor.com's Joel Berner and NerdWallet's Kaz Wida, we rounded up 9 ways to save, starting with reducing coverage on older vehicles.
If it were to get totaled, you might not be in a position where it makes sense to repair it.
Wida says look at usage-based or pay-per-mile insurance and safe driving discounts. Look for discounts on your home policy, too.
Ranging from being in a STEM field to not smoking in your home.
A riskier way to lower your monthly costs is to ask for higher deductibles.
When you do file a claim, you'll have to pay more out of pocket, but your monthly premium will be a little bit lower.
Also, shopping around for quotes, bundling, and talking to an agent. Lastly, improving your credit score. A higher score indicates lower risk to insurers.
That might take some time and some persistence, but you should see a little bit of difference in your rate.
Hilbert says he asked his insurer to help, but didn't get far. So now he's ready to switch if he finds cheaper coverage.
Sometimes you can tweak it, but I was like, I gotta shop it.
You too may be able to craft a lower rate so you don't waste your money. John Mattery, Scripps News Group.
You're watching Today's It Happened. Back in a moment. We're glad you're back with Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
Soon. That is the word from the Justice Department about when more of the Epstein files will be released. That's according to a top Justice Department official. However, Attorney General Pam Bondi did not give specific dates as to when that review would be complete. Congress passed that law with nearly unanimous backing that placed the deadline for all the files to be released. It's now been more than a month since that deadline has passed. No new documents have been released since the start of the year. Good news for lovers of Seattle. Coffee giant Starbucks company saying its turnaround plans are working after reporting fourth quarter growth of 4%, better than expected. The CEO there addressed customer complaints of long lines, limited seating, but they also laid off about 2,000 corporate employees and closed underperforming stores. Yale University making college more affordable for middle-class families. Next year, the Ivy League school will offer free tuition to undergrads who their families make less than $200,000 a year. Families making less than $100,000 a year will get all of their expenses covered. Yale saying nearly half of American families with children could now qualify for that full financial aid. FBI agents are executing a search warrant at the Fulton County, Georgia election offices in Atlanta. Another indication that the White House continues to maintain the 2020 election was stolen. Georgia officials continue to say it was not. Let's go right to our Scripps News legal affairs correspondent, Avajoy Burnett, who's tracking the developments from Atlanta. And Avajoy, tell us what you're seeing, what you're hearing.
Yeah, this is something that really caught many people off guard. We're now hearing, as you mentioned, that the FBI has executed the search warrant at this facility in Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia. And many people may remember Fulton County as being the site where former President Donald Trump, along with at least more than a dozen other people, faced criminal charges, accusations that they tried to interfere with the results of the 2020 election. You're seeing a piece of video right now out of Georgia as FBI agents walk around this particular facility. It's Georgia Fulton County Election Office. And the really quick note that we got as confirmation from the FBI about the search, it's really simple. They said they can confirm that agents are executing a court-authorized law enforcement action at this particular facility. You see it says it right there, registration and elections. And as I was mentioning, Dale, Fulton County is a significant place really in the history of the United States because that's where the district attorney, Fani Willis, back just a few years ago, brought brought state charges against Donald Trump. Donald Trump at the time was running to be president once again, and Fani Willis made accusations that he took steps to interfere with the 2020 election results. There were several other people who were named on that indictment. It was so wide-ranging. It was a RICO indictment. There were people like Rudy Giuliani who were named as co-defendants there, Mark Meadows, for example. And that case took many twists and turns because District Attorney Fani Willis was eventually disqualified from continuing with that prosecution because of accusations that she had an inappropriate relationship with a special prosecutor who she put on this case. And then in November of last year, the new prosecutor who was put in charge of this case said that they would not continue with any criminal charges in this matter. So that matter was effectively dropped against the former president, a big win for him. His attorney at the time sent out a simple message saying that it was good that that prosecution was dropped against President Donald Trump. And if you thought all of this was over, we now see this matter bubbling up again, where it appears as if the administration wants to continue to look into the possibility of election interference in Fulton County. But now the tables have turned. Now it seems as if they are going against the local officials there, the election officials there, continuing with allegations that there was election interference because the president did not win that state in the 2020 election. We must note, Del, that the previous Attorney General for the United States said that there was no finding of wrongdoing in Fulton County. But even so, we now see that this new administration is moving ahead and possibly will continue with some sort of investigation into Fulton County after really a long-standing back and forth and accusations that local folks in that jurisdiction did something wrong, even though we saw in previous findings that that was not the case. Del?
And Eva Joy, we are now starting to get some sound coming out of Fulton County, Georgia. Let's take a listen to what officials there are saying.
Which I'm a part of, we're extremely alarmed by this. I have to stress what I know so far is unconfirmed rumors from officials talking to each other, but what we've heard is that the main FBI office, not the local FBI office, has been dispatched here to try to collect 2020 ballots. Again, ballots from not the last presidential election, but the one before that. And famously, Donald Trump has made Fulton County the object of his ire throughout the country. It's made Fulton County, national news for all the wrong reasons because he has pushed these baseless conspiracy theories that the election was somehow, quote, stolen and that Georgia was the epicenter of this. And unfortunately, Fulton County officials have paid the price. If we recall that there were county election workers who were harassed, who had to bring defamation lawsuits, who were under physical threats, needed security because of the lies and conspiracy theories that Donald Trump has been pushing.
Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Eva Joy Burnett updating our audience on what is going on in Atlanta. An FBI spokesperson saying agents are executing a court-authorized law enforcement action, their words, at the county's main election office in Union City, just south of Atlanta. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is on Capitol Hill today answering questions related to that U.S. military action in Venezuela. It comes weeks after the U.S. ousted former President Nicolas Maduro from power. He's now inside a U.S. jail on drug-related charges, and the administration maintains a carrier group is in the region. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is live now on the North Lawn. And Haley, what did we learn during Secretary Rubio's testimony today?
Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio defending the administration's actions in Venezuela to lawmakers today, and the secretary touting progress while balancing it with the message that the administration is realistic, telling lawmakers that they expect to be further along in 6 months while honing in on a goal of stability. Rubio says a team is on the ground and they believe they can quickly establish a diplomatic presence there. He also says that they are finding cooperation and serious counter-narcotics talks with the current Venezuelan authorities. As we have heard from the administration throughout this, Rubio did not commit to a timeline for transition, but said he is meeting with opposition leader, Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Corina Machado today as the administration continues to deal with Maduro's once number 2 in command, Delcy Rodriguez. Now, in a written statement to the committee, Rubio said Rodriguez is aware of Maduro's fate and that they believe her, quote, own self-interest aligns with advancing our key objectives. This was a point, the authority in Venezuela and how the administration is viewing this that was pressed upon by lawmakers. Listen.
By no means is our policy to leave in place something permanent that's as corrupt as you've described. We are in the transition and stabilization phase. We are just acknowledging reality, and that is you have to work with the people that are in charge of the elements. The president is acknowledging is that today, as it stands, whether we like it or not, the elements of control in that country, the people with the guns, the people that control the guns and the institutions of government there, are in the hands of this regime. So we either, on the one hand, we're getting criticized. Some people are saying we don't want regime change. On the other hand, we're being criticized for not undertaking regime change.
Mr. Secretary,
what we're trying to trigger here is a process of stabilization, recovery, and transition to something where Maria Corina and others can be a part of.
Rubio also reiterated that the president reserves the right to use force to, quote, ensure maximum cooperation if other methods fail, but told lawmakers that there is not an expectation or a posture that additional military action is needed. He also provided details, Del, on another significant issue with all of this, the sale of sanctioned Venezuelan oil. He says the U.S. will dictate what those proceeds can be used for and that Venezuela would have to submit a budget request to the United States. That expenditure would also go through an audit. He notably called it not a blockade, but a quarantine of oil. Del?
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bowl live for us on the North Lawn. Haley, thank you very much.
Up next on Today's It Happened.
The Federal Reserve holding interest rates steady to kick off the new year. I'm business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett. Coming up, how the central bank is balancing even more political pressure.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into our rundown of the top stories of the day.
The Fed stays put, keeping interest rates as they are, 3.6%. It lowered the rates 3 times prior to today's decision. President Trump has insisted the rates be slashed further. Let's go right now to Scripps News business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett. And Maura, you watched Powell's news conference. He said the economy has been expanding at, quote, a solid pace. But for people who are out there looking for jobs and can't find one, or those who can't afford to buy a home, Powell's statement may be a little difficult to understand.
Yeah, Del. So when the Fed chair is saying solid pace, that's actually an upgrade from what we heard at the last meeting to close out 2025, in which the board had referred to economic activity at a moderate pace. Now, in tandem with that, Fed officials noted in their description of why they decided to hold interest rates steady, they said that unemployment rate has shown, quote, some signs of stabilization after previously saying that it had been edging up. However, inflation is the issue that they are still looking to tamp down. It has leveled out a little bit, but ultimately that is the major focus for the Fed right now. The interesting thing that the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell noted in terms of the economic activity during the question and answer session of the press conference that just wrapped up, he said that despite consumer sentiment being down, we're actually seeing solid activity when it comes to consumer spending. He said it's uneven across income categories, but overall consumer spending numbers are good, noting that we are benefiting from the AI build out of data centers. And that's something that he had brought up previously in terms of the economic benefit of AI, but couldn't speak to kind of the longevity of how long that will boost the economy. Now, I do think the other thing that stood out to me in this press conference in terms of the outlook for the economy looking forward is the comment that he made about the government shutdown, the impacts of the government shutdown we saw in the fall, though we're just starting to see the economy level out from that. And he projected confidence looking ahead to continue doing that. Of course, we are potentially approaching another government shutdown. And so the impacts of that are undetermined, but definitely were something of note, considering that he said that the fall government shutdown did have more of an impact on the economy now that they're able to look at that data. The other element that we learned in terms of the tariffs are something that Chair Powell has talked about several times in terms of impacting inflation, calling them inflationary. He said that it appears that most of the tariffs, the economic impact of it, has moved through. So unless the status of tariffs changes significantly, that is something that might level off in terms of helping boost the economy a little bit more. I will say, despite all of this wonky data that we just worked our way through, we do know that consumer confidence is at record low levels, the lowest sentiment since 2014. A lot of people in that survey that was just released yesterday, it's down 10 points, noting the price of groceries, the price of oil and gas, inflation in general, as well as healthcare costs. And so this is just yet another example, to your point, of the numbers aren't exactly matching with what people, everyday Americans, are feeling when it comes to what they're having to spend, Del.
So also, Mara, on this note, this is also the first time the Fed has met since news leaked that the Fed chair is under investigation. Did he talk about that?
He did a little bit. He declined to comment specifically, and it was actually a series of declined comments that we listened to. And I think one of the reasons we are paying such close attention today, in addition to the question of the interest rates, is the political spotlight that both the chair and the Fed in general is under right now. And we were looking to see if he would comment on that investigation specifically after he had released a video in early January after that investigation was announced, a very unusual move in terms of him being so outspoken, calling the investigation a threat and kind of suggesting that the president or the administration is looking to kind of put political pressure on him in that way. We're also looking to see if he would respond to the fact that he went to watch the Supreme Court oral arguments over the case of the firing of his colleague Lisa Cook. There was also the big question of when his term is up in May, if he will remain on the board. Now, I just want to bring you into the room with reporters. I've been in there several times. And when he declines to comment, it's a very pointed sentence with a period at the end. But there were so many back-to-back today. I just want you to listen to how he responded to these questions.
I'm simply going to refer you to the statement that I made on January 11. I'm not going to expand on it or repeat it. I have nothing for you on that today. There's a time and place for these questions, but not something I'm going to be getting into today.
Now, the Fed chair is known for tap dancing his way around these political questions. It is so rare for these political issues to even come to the Federal Reserve. It's usually something we don't have to pay attention to. It's not usually something that's in the headlines, but this is an atypical Federal Reserve with an atypical administration placing a lot of political pressure on Chair Jerome Powell. The closest we got to a political comment was right at the end of the press conference when he was asked if he had any advice for the chair that's going to be replacing him. And one of the key things he did say, his key point of advice was stay out of elected politics. Don't get pulled into elected politics. Just don't do it. So a little bit of interesting additional context in it on top of that wonky economic data today, Del.
I believe they called what he did not taking the bait. Scripps News business and tech correspondent Mara Barrett for us live in Denver. Mara, thank you very much.
Coming up on Today As It Happened.
I'm Scripps News reporter Patrick Terpstra in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where we are learning more about the status of two officers who fired shots at ICU nurse Alex Pretti. We'll have the latest.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's get to it.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz came by to visit the memorial for Alex Pretti, that ICU nurse that was killed over the weekend by federal agents. Walz joining dozens of others who continue to come out to this very solemn scene. Customs and Border Patrol confirming that the two officers who fired shots at Pretti have been placed on administrative leave. A spokesman for the agency saying this is standard protocol, but we did not hear the administration ever say whether the ICE agent who shot Renee Good was ever placed on leave. This announcement comes as the administration has been walking back from claims that Pretti was the aggressor. No evidence has emerged to support DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's statement that Pretti had been brandishing a gun. There are growing calls, at least among Democrats, for Noem to be impeached or to step down. Republican senators on Capitol Hill saying Noem's future is up to the president.
He'll decide who he wants to be leading this, and I defer to him. I mean, it's his cabinet.
The most important thing is whether the president trusts her.
Also in Minneapolis, a skirmish at an Ecuadorian consulate where Ecuador says ICE agents tried to get in without permission. Ecuador filing a formal complaint against the U.S. government about that. President Trump had said that he wanted to de-escalate things a bit in Minnesota and Minneapolis, but then posted to Truth Social that the mayor, Jacob Fry, was, quote, violating federal law and playing with fire for not doing more to help police illegal immigration. Patrick Terpstra, Scripps News Group, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Because of everything Patrick just said, it is looking more and more likely that there will be a partial government shutdown Friday night. This time, Democrats saying they will not move forward with funding DHS. They says they won't do so unless Homeland Security, Border Patrol, and ICE change their policies. Some even calling for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to be fired or impeached. Follows those back-to-back shootings you heard Patrick describe in Minnesota. Our congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill. And Nate, is there an off-ramp at all at this hour to prevent a government shutdown?
In some ways there is, Dell. We have a picture of what avoiding a government shutdown could look like here on Capitol Hill, and that's because Democrats have made known what their demands are to prevent that shutdown in order to unlock their support for funding for the Department of Homeland Security, which of course includes ICE and Customs and Border Protection. Now, Democrats want large structural changes to some of the way that ICE has been operating in cities like Minneapolis all across the country. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer outlining those this afternoon, making clear that Democrats do not support the work of ICE during the second Trump administration.
This is not border security. This is not law and order. This is chaos. What ICE is doing is state-sanctioned thuggery. It must stop. Republicans must work with Democrats to find legislative solutions to restore order and public safety. Congress has the authority and the moral obligation to act. What's missing is Republican will to act.
And we got somewhat of a sense of what Leader Schumer is looking for. He said that all Democrats agree on the following 3 bullet points, the following 3 areas for changes to immigrations and customs enforcement. They want to end roving patrols of cities and ensure the use of warrants by ICE officers. They also want to boost accountability and create a framework for investigations, along with probably the most critical one for many Democrats, banning agent masking. You've seen a lot of agents in the street of Minneapolis and other cities wearing masks, obscuring their identity, also requiring that they wear and use body cameras and use and carry proper identification, much like any other police force would across the country. So that is the opening argument from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. A lot of questions about whether Republicans would be willing to play ball there. This would require a whole lot of Republicans being willing to abide by those terms, being willing to revise a funding bill that just up until a couple of days ago, Dell, looked like it was going to be a slam dunk to pass here on Capitol Hill, especially after the House of Representatives passed it at the end of last week. The complication here, though, Dell, is the House of Representatives is on recess this week. They are not here in Washington. Speaker Johnson would effectively likely need to call them back to prevent a government shutdown. It's not seeming likely at this point that he will do that, meaning the odds of a shutdown happening just appear to be growing greater by the hour.
Thanks so much for joining us on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Have a great Wednesday night.